This is a presentation I gave recently. It's based around the idea that it's about time we kind of drop the boundaries that we apply. Not so much consciously, but we've kind of almost evolved to spot the differences between us and others. You know, be them slightly brutish in our opinions, be them autistic, and be them older, be them a different colour, and kind of how the brain's geared to kind of spot out what could possibly make us separate and almost alien to others, and kind of just looking at a method that may, take us to where we should be, which is essentially a togetherness, where all bridges have been, the gap has been wiped out of the equation, a togetherness. So anyway, I haven't really edited it for the purpose of this, but it's a presentation essentially on positive behaviour support, which is, you can kind of read in the semantics of it, and it is what it is, and the function of behaviour. I called it an evocative philosophical approach to what we do. I will be dropping the C-bomb, and there's a bit of profanity, but as we all know, we get into what we're saying. But I hate starting things. I'm fairly well versed in the killer closing line as a writer, but I'll sit for hours trying to get the first sentence down. But when I had to give another presentation, I had to text my boxing coach for some positive traits that he saw in me. He was incredibly flattering. He asked me how I was getting on. He knew it was a big deal for me. It was kind of the first time recently that my thinking's actually taken me anywhere. And I let him know that I was shit scared of public speaking. He interrupted me whilst I was in a rapid rant about maybe asking the instructor whether we could make a special sideline for me, and maybe I could go down to the bar and have a few beers, and everyone could pile in, and I'd give them this over a few whiskey chasers and a shaking hand cradling a cigarette. He stopped me in the middle of this, and he was like, "But Jamie, you talked a man down who was about to," and it clicked. And I stopped. And I stopped him. I was like, "Yeah, sorry Russell, but I've got to get off the phone. I've got to write this down." So I'm going to start with a true story, in the absence of explanation. So bear with me. There's a little test at the end to see how much you've been paying attention. This specific little chat is based around my working with people who fall onto the autism spectrum, and might help you to swing it along if I explain that. It shouldn't really matter. But I was standing half cut at a urinal in my local, and this guy walks in. I'm taking a piss, and he walked straight up to me. He put one hand on my shoulder, and basically said, "I'm gonna fucking slice you, cunt." It's a C-bomb out of the way. And this happened before my physical training and before my counselling training, so didn't really know what to do. So whilst I'm sitting there on this fear spectrum, or maybe well off to the edge, my life was ending. He was convincing. But I zipped up and I turned around to look at him. He definitely outsized me, and he had those crazy eyes, the eyes that they get you what you want, but not for the right reasons. I've got no conscious process to offer you from then. There was no sense of bravery. I just turned to look at him, and I looked at him and he said, "Are you alright?" Well, he insisted that I'd never really give a shit, but I insisted otherwise. As far as I can tell, with a knife centimetres away from your vital organs, didn't really have a choice in the matter. So I looked at him again and I said, come on, man, what's wrong? I'm listening to you. They're not going to be the exact words. The chance of those being the exact words are slimmer than a ballet dancer's forearm. But on saying those words, he started talking. He told me how his brother was incredibly successful and how his sister was happily married and how he'd himself just got out of prison to be told by his parents that he'd failed them. They didn't want anything to do with him. The knife was still there, but I looked up to his face and, he had a tear in each eye. So, I said, put the knife down and put it away. Don't want to leave a knife on the toilet floor. We'll go to the bar, you probably owe me a drink, quite a stressful situation, and you can just talk to me if you'd like. Well, an hour later, he was in my arms and he was weeping. I whispered it's okay into his ear. I told him to ditch the knife. I told him to sleep it off. I told him I'd be here tomorrow, or there tomorrow, from opening. He left me with a handshake. I never saw him again, but as far as I'm concerned, I owe him a drink. And to this day, I'd really quite like to buy him it. One, because I do the same with any of you. And two, because I want him to know that he doesn't have to threaten a life just to gain access to a listening ear. It could have been 3 years later. I could have had the training. I could have collapsed the windpipe. Doesn't get him anywhere. I could have phoned the police. I could have put him back in prison, which many of you will probably say that's probably what I should have done. But again, it puts him back into this continuing cycle of never really being heard. Well, the point of the story is that everyone has a story, a setting event. Yeah, he put a knife to me, but that black and white surface analysis, it doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't get him anywhere. This fine example of what, in my trade we call challenging behaviour, it had a function for him. Did he want attention? Did he want to feel as if he had control on a situation amidst his own hopeless world? Or did he simply want to share the fear he felt as this isolated individual? Or did he just want someone else to understand him? You see, not only did considering these options potentially save me the unwanted ambulance ride to surgery, but it did something else. It gave him something he never thought he would receive. It gave him a taste of feeling understood, something that we all probably take for granted. It gave him this sense of security and unionship in a world that had, up until that moment, only offered him subtractions. So by establishing this connection, I paid into his emotional bank account. And by listening to him, I'd tamed what others might simply label a savage. See, we have to remember that every single person we come into contact with has a back catalogue of events. They have different interpretations of familiar stimulus. They have a subconscious that gets into the driving seat from time to time. The behaviour we see on the surface it's not entirely them, but what being them has driven them to do. See, there's more to man than what we see him do and what he is surrounded by. He has a past that took him there. So seeing the man behind the mask of his behaviour saved me, but more importantly it saved him. And there is a vital importance in being able to really see. But what does this really see actually mean? Well, we know that our verbal communication equates to around 7% of what we actually say. And behind this is a whole host of non-verbal communication, and behind that is something deeper than this, kind of a driving mechanism that manoeuvres mouth and body based on its experience. But how do we access that? Well, aside from reading body language, I think it's paramount that we forget ourselves for these moments with people. Even if we are watching behaviour that resounds in familiarity, we must remember that we are watching the manifestation of their story and not our own. Now, these triggers, these pivotal points that insist that the individual reacts, when we identify them, they may echo within them. They will echo within them on this level that just insists that they do something. A black cat might arouse suspicion through the telling of the old wives' tale, but that same black cat might be a fond memory of childhood that provided some calm in an otherwise hostile environment. For another, it could be an unwanted pet left at a lonely home when a wife left in pursuit of a better man. That cat could cut him down to tears. That black cat means something different to each of us. And I think that what I've just said highlights the fact that there are infinite possibilities for our consideration. I myself have triggers that I still don't quite understand, and I will sit and hack away at myself for hours. But that doesn't mean I've considered giving up. What I've learned from looking at the way in which I try and assess myself is the better relationship I have with myself, be it through exercise, meditation, time in the outdoors, good sleep patterns, a healthy diet, the more I increase the chance of furthering my understanding of myself. I build up a good rapport with myself. I pay into my own emotional bank account. I find that I get to know myself as a friend as opposed to the ruthless critic. And that's when the answers start to come. And this is almost exactly the same as how we should be doing it with other people. Until we've built a good rapport, there's no real way that we can begin to understand each other as people, as opposed to problems. So going back to the idea of this forgetting of ourselves, what I mean is that we open our minds. We can't thrust our own concepts onto the behaviour of another. And there's a video from the TED Talk series by Chimamanda Ngozi entitled The Danger of a Single Story. She warns us that if we only hear one story about a person or a country, we risk this critical misunderstanding. I don't have the power to insist that you type it into YouTube and give it a watch, but I recommend it. It's not quite the same thing, but it's too close to ignore. Basically, if we look at behaviour with this blinkered view, we not only risk but almost guarantee that we'll all get it very, very wrong. We risk taking on this strange concept that we all have the same ideas and connections as each other. Almost this inability to see another human mind. It's just a mirror of our own within another body. If the colour red pisses off a minotaur, then it's also going to piss off a unicorn simply because they both have horns. We can't simplify people and their situation by applying our own situation, and it's easy to do. I know it's easy to do because I used to do it. I still do it sometimes. If anyone came up to me reporting anxiety, I'd recommend they take up a full contact martial art. If anyone came at me, with a dose of depression, I'd suggest a really long run. You lose a lot of friends. But before I wind this in, can any of you remember how many times I've referred to my subject matter, which would be learning disabilities or autism or mental health? Other than the blurb that kind of tied you all into this, I haven't. But how can I talk about this positive behaviour support and the functions of behaviour without mentioning the terminology and the separate groups of people that we might apply this thinking to? It's easy. There's no fucking need. When you really open your eyes, there are no staggering differences or crippling obstacles between any of us. There's this little gap to bridge, but you have that same bridge when you meet anyone for the first time. So, to cut this short, I believe that what we experience as challenging behaviour, something that really makes us back off and go, whoa, you can't do that. All it is a real-time manifestation of at some point being misunderstood. As individuals, now at this point I have to switch away from the thing because you may not have yet, but I hope you do. But as individuals who should take it upon themselves to give a shit, it is our duty to let those around you, be it people who you work for, be it your colleagues, be it your family or friends or strangers who you come into contact with, let them know that you're doing all you can to understand their story and that you're eager to do so. So, as this comes to a close, we shut down this, don't shut down entirely, but get back in there being the open world, open your eyes and your minds and your hearts if you like, and learn those stories, because if you learn those stories, you can help change how they end. Thank you.